Well, yeah, thanks again. I appreciate you all taking the time to join. My name is Sam Harrison. What we're going to be talking about in this session today is the fundamentals of CtTrac. So basically what I'm hoping to communicate with you all is the very basics of CtTrac at the elementary level. I want to break it down for somebody that's never seen this before. So for those of you that are on the call that are currently using scope processing or the CtTrac module or CtTrac Advanced, you might know a lot of this stuff that I'm going to talk already, but we're going to break this down at a very basic core level, as if we were like implementing this for the first time. And I'm going to walk through each screen, and explain in detail like what's happening and how we can set this up or make changes if you already have this set up. Like I said, my name is Sam Harrison. I work on the clinical services team with Census as a senior clinical educator. So basically what we do is we work with Service Plus customers. So Service Plus is a subscription, and what it is we'll perform an annual assessment at your facility. So it'll be a detailed assessment of how CensiTrac's being used in each area, usually starting with decontamination, container assembly, sterilization, post-sterilization, and how CensiTrac's being used in all of these areas. We'll try to identify any areas where where there might be gaps in the process, or any areas where your staff may need review, or any areas where anything's broken. We'll try to identify these things and come up with a training plan, and then we'll send somebody out on site to work one-on-one with your staff to kind of deliver that training. We have a few new options of Service Plus this year. In lieu of the on-site training, you can also choose some data options. So there's some new things happening with Service Plus. But anyway, that's what I do. So I have worked with, I see some of you on the call I've spent some time with, so hello again. But yeah, so enough about me. Again, we are going to be talking about CtTrac. So the way that this next hour is going to look is we're actually going to log into the demo, and I'll share my screen, and then we're going to start from the very beginning. So we're going to start by creating a new scope processor, and we're going to look at the cycles, group settings, and load details for that. We're going to then move into creating scopes, and then we're going to look at like managing and editing existing scopes. And then we're also going to, after that, we're going to go into the user end functionality of processing that scope. So step one, or part one, is going to be like the administration, configuration, and setup. Part two is going to be the end user functionality of actually processing a scope, and you'll see what your techs see when they're actually doing this. I'll try to call out some common things that I see while I'm on site, some common errors and some common issues that we can, that I see to help you try to troubleshoot these things if you're seeing them at your place. But yeah. So, and what I'll also do, I forgot to mention, is we're also going to talk about the difference between
the bottom somewhere,
CtTrac and CtTrac Advanced. So I'll also make sure to call out those differences too. So with that said, I'm going to switch screens here, and let's go into the demo, the CensiTrac demo. All right, so what you're seeing right now is our CensiTrac demo. This is what we're going to be working in the next hour. And also for this afternoon session, when you all come back, you'll be working in this demo also. So we'll have like an exercise sheet to where you can go through this exercise and do because today, right now, what I'm going to show you, so we're going to set all this up and we're going to create our scopes and create our AER devices. And then this afternoon, you can actually go in and go through the exercise of processing a scope and kind of get some hands on yourself. So this afternoon, when you log into the demo, this is what you'll see. You'll see this demo here. And just a couple quick things about this demo. Some of you might not be familiar with this. So when you log into this demo is set up as a multi-facility database. So when you get to the login screen, you have like a drop down here, and you have 2 facilities, Metro General and West End. Not all of you might be in a multi-facility database. Some of you might be in a multi-facility database with more than 2 facilities. So all this is that there's multiple hospitals on this CensiTrac server, and that's how this demo is set up. So if you see different areas in this demo that maybe look a little bit different than what you're seeing in your CensiTrac database, it's because this demo has all of the latest features, including CensiTrac Advanced, ScopeTrac Advanced, and it's also set up as a multi-facility. So if you're unfamiliar with multi-facility, that's fine. It's just know that that's what is happening here. So when I log into this demo, I'm going to be logging into the Metro General facility, and you all should have a username and password. If you don't have that, you can put all of that in the chat. If you have any questions throughout all of this, or any issues or anything like that, technical issues, just put all that in the chat, and then there's census people on this call that'll help you get that all worked out. So I'm going to log in. All right, so I am logged into CensiTrac right now. So everybody's probably familiar with this main screen here. I'm not going to get in too much detail about other things besides ScopeTrac because we have a limited amount of time. I mean, there's a lot of things that I could just talk about on this main screen here, and we will get into some of this stuff that's important, but I'm not going to stray too far off of the ScopeTrac path. So the first thing that we're going to do in this presentation here is we are going to pretend that we are either setting up. So say that we're at a hospital, right? And we're going to start a new HLD area. So we have a new HLD area, and we want to start using, and it's currently got a paper process to document all of your scope records, but we want to digitalize that process, and we want to use CensiTrac to do that. Okay. So what we're going to do is we are going to build a new AER device. We're going to create our AERs or our HLD devices in CensiTrac, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So to do that, what you're going to do is you're going to navigate to the Administration Reprocessing Machines module. So I'm going to do that right now. And like I mentioned before, what we're doing now is going to be part of the exercise later. So these things that we're doing now, we'll be able to run through this, and you'll be able to get some hands-on with what I'm doing. But prior to that, I want to show you how to do it screen by screen and talk through some of this detail. So what I'm doing here might seem like it's very drawn out and very long. That's just because I'm just talking a bunch and I've given a lot of detail, but typically once you get these processes down, it's pretty quick. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my Reprocessing Machines module. When you're in this module, if you're not familiar with this module, the way that this screen, the way that this works is when you come to this screen, it always defaults to sterilizers. If you look at the top left of the screen, I can see sterilizers, incubators, and washers. Okay. Within my sterilizers tab, that's where all my sterilizers and HLD devices are going to live. Incubators is going to host my incubators. Washers is going to host my washers. Okay, I'm going to go back to sterilizers. And remember, when we first logged in, I said this was a multi-facility database. So this means that we can toggle between our different facilities. So in this database, I can click this drop down and I can see my sister facilities devices by selecting that. But I am working in Metro General facility, so that's the facility that I'm going to remain in. So again, if you're not at a multi-facility database, that's fine. You just won't have this because you don't need to have it. If you are at a multi-facility database, then you probably already know what I'm already talking about. What we're going to be doing in this page is we are going to be creating a brand new HLD machine. Okay, so to do that, we're going to start by taking a look at what we have existing, right? So if I look at my sterilizer tab, I can see that I have all these different groups. Okay, so I have this CSEO group, ethylene oxide. I have my steam group, my STERAD group, my endolab group, my steam sterilizer group, and my OR group. Okay, so I have all of these existing groups already. So in this demo that I'm working in, we already have an HLD device group. You see it's this MG EndoLab group. If I click the little arrow, so you see next to this group, there's this box with this drop down and these 3 lines. That's called the action menu in CensiTrac. So when I say action menu, that's what I mean. If you click the arrow to the left of the action menu, what you're going to see is all of the devices within that group. All right. So within my NG EndoLab group, I have all of these scope processors already. So in this demo, we already have HLD devices created, but what we're going to do is we're going to create a brand new group and a brand new device so you can see what that process looks like. All right. So we'll create a group and create a new device, and then we'll come back and edit this existing group for those of you that are, maybe just want to clean up some of your stuff. So we'll kind of go through all of that. That's one thing I see a lot when I go on site is that the group setting cycles and load details need to be cleaned up for the device groups. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So again, what we're going to do right now is pretend that we're setting this up for the first time, or we're like adding a new group, right? So let's say that you're currently using CtUC, and you currently have a device group with all of your HLD devices in it, but then you get a new HLD device that's different from what you already have, right? And it requires different tests and different things like that. So if that's the case, you want to put your new device into a new device group, because each device group is the tests are configured per device group. And I think a good way to explain that is like Steam and STERAD, right? So you see I have my Steam device group. If I expand that group, I have my Steam sterilizers, okay? And if I expand my STERAD group, I have my one STERAD sterilizer. I would not want to put my STERAD sterilizer in my Steam group because they require different, cycles, load details, and settings. So same thing with HLD devices. If they require different, tests and settings, we're going to separate those groups. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to create a new group. Okay, so to do that, at the top right of the screen, you can click the Add Group button. And I'm just going to call this group, I'm going to call it MG. And the reason I'm calling it MG is because I'm in a multi-facility database. So the multi-facility usually has a prefix. If you're not in a multi-facility, don't worry about that. If you are, then you'll probably know what I mean. I'm going to call it MGHLD reprocess. I think I spelled that wrong. Reprocessor. And I'm going to save that. Okay, so what I just did is I just created a new group here. Do you see there's no arrow to the left of the action menu? That is because there's nothing in that group yet. So I can't expand it like I can these other groups because there's no devices in it. So let's go ahead and create a device quick. And to do that, to add a device to this new group, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click the action menu beside the group. And I have these different options here. We'll talk about each one of these options in a second, but right now what I want to do is I just want to click Add Machine. Okay, so I'm going to click Add Machine. And then now this is saying I'm at the part where I'm actually creating the machine. So what I'm going to do here is for the location, I'm going to click Add New. And I'm going to give this a new machine. So I'm going to call it MG I'm going to call it, let's say I got an OER Pro. Okay, that's what I'm going to call it. And then I'm also going to give it a number. So let's say, actually, I'm going to hold off on the number because I want to illustrate, the machine number and how that works. So we'll come back to that. So I've given it a name, and then I'm going to, just let CensiTrac know what facility it's in. If you're not at a multi-facility, you might not see that. It might just say none. And I'm going to let it know which building it's in, and then the area. What this does behind the scenes then, if you look behind the scenes, by assigning this device to this facility, building, and area, if you were to navigate to admin locations, it would just put it in that area within that building, within that facility. So if we had like more time, I would kind of go in and show you, and if we have time at the end, I'll kind of show you the admin locations screen and show you how you can kind of clean that up a little bit and get everything to where it needs to be and how to move things around. But anyway, I'm going to put it in the Endo Lab, and then it already knows what group it's in because I added it to that group on the previous screen. The method I'm going to select as disinfect because it's a high level disinfect. And then down here, this is where this gets a little tricky and sometimes a little difficult to explain. So this machine number, this is what the staff will see when they're resulting their load. So when they go to their load list, they'll see the device name, which is MGOR Pro. But then to enter that load, they will click what's called the lot number scheme. And we'll talk about that in a second. The lot number scheme has a machine number in it. Generally, you want your machine number to match the number in the machine name. So when I say machine name, that's up here, the name of the machine. So like MGOR Pro number 5. I would want my machine number to also be number 5. The thing is, in this database is a little sporadic. So we have a bunch of numbers that don't go in sequential order. What I mean by that is, like, if I were to select machine number 3 and click view conflicts, machine number 3 is already used by 2 other devices. And that's what this view conflicts is letting me know, that there's already 2 other devices that have machine number 3. And this is good that this demo set up this way so I can illustrate this point. This is, to me, this would be incorrect. You see where I see CSEO MG gas number 1. This is what I mean. So the number in the machine name is different than the number in the machine lot number. So this lot number reads like this. It's April 29th, 2013. That's the last time this EO was ran. Device number 3, load number 1. So that's how this works. This in this database. So those of you at the VA, your lot number scheme is probably different. The VA tends to use a Julian date, and we'll talk about lot numbers in the next page. The point I'm trying to make here is that I want my machine, the number in my machine name, to match the number in my lot number scheme. So that's what I'm going to strive for here. So to do that in this database, I already know that I have to go to like 51 because everything else is taken. So if I click 51, see there, actually 51 is taken too. Let me go to 52. Okay, so no other device in my database has a machine number of 52, so that's available. I'm going to take it. Typically, what you'd want to do or what makes the most sense to me is having like your main devices, your Steam, being like 1 through whatever. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Then your STARAD 6, 7. Then your washers 8, 9, 10. Having your devices go in a sequential order, starting at 1 with the most frequently used. That doesn't happen everywhere, and some places jump around, and that's fine. If that's how you're used to doing it and it's working for you, it doesn't require change. But in my mind, I like to see things 1 through whatever in sequential order, a nice neat list. So at another time I would go in and talk about like renaming all of your devices and what that process entails, and including communicating to your staff and going in and changing the labels and all of that, which can be a little project, but once you get it done, then it's done. But that's beside the point. We're going to stick to CensiTrac. So the machine number is 52, and this max weight limit here, this doesn't really apply to HLD devices. What this is a newer function within CensiTrac to where you can assign a maximum weight to a sterilizer, right? So if I say that let's say that I was creating a new STARAD sterilizer. Let's say that I assigned it a maximum weight of 200 pounds. And then if my sets had weights associated with them and those sets were scanned into that sterilizer and it exceeded that 200 pounds, the technician would get a notification saying that the maximum weight has been exceeded, and that can help prevent like wet loads and help prevent like, items from being not completely sterilized. Doesn't really pertain to what we're doing now, so we're just going to leave that field blank. All right. So I'm going to save this now. And what I'm going to do is I realized that I forgot to put the machine number up in the machine name. So I'm going to do that right now. So I'm going to rename this machine name to MG Pro number 52 and save that. So now what we see is we have, we just created our device, right? So we have our machine name, we have our method, and it's got a number and all the other information there. So what I can do now is I'm going to hit save and close, and let's go back and look at this page. And I can see that we have our MG EndoLab, MG HLD reprocessor is the group that we just created. Okay, now if I expand this group, I'm able to expand it now by clicking that arrow to the left of the action menu because we have a device in there now. You see, there's the device that we just created. So that's only part of setting this up. The other part of this is configuring the group settings, cycles, and load details. And for those of you that are already using CensiTrac and like want to clean this up, this is something that you can do today. So the way that this works now is if I click the action menu beside the group that I just created, I'm going to do that now. I have different group settings, cycles, and load details. So what this means is if I click this action menu and click settings, this is going to change the settings for this particular group, right? For this MG HLD reprocessor group. If I were to click the action menu beside the steam group and click settings, it would change the settings for that group, right? If I were to click the action menu beside the STERAD group and click settings, it would be specific to that group. So what I want to do is edit my HLD reprocessing group settings. And I'm going to do that by clicking the action menu and then clicking settings. And right here is where we have our manual data entry. The load number scheme that I was talking about. So I'm actually going to pop out of this screen real quick and go into the load list. And then this is where, so you can see what the technician sees. So we're going to come right back to this page and continue to edit these group settings. But I think it'll make more sense if you can see like the end result of what we're trying to do. So to do that, I'm just going to use this quick tab up here to go to my load list. And this is where, the staff go to result their scope loads and sterile loads. So this is what I mean by that load number scheme. You see how it has this format here. The date is January 29th, 21. The way that this reads is, January 29th, 21, device number 21, load 1. So that's what's called the lot number scheme, okay? Most private or non-VA facilities, not all, but most of them use this format. VAs will tend to use a different format. So what happens here is how that can be designated is where we just were. So let's go back to where we just were. That's going to be main menu, administration, reprocessing machines. And if I go to that MG HLD reprocessor group, remember this is where I'm going to click the action menu beside that and click settings. All right, so manual data entry. So this is where I denote that lot number scheme. So I'm going to make this consistent with all of the other lot number schemes for all of my other device groups. You don't want your device groups to have different lot number schemes because that's just going to be confusing for people. So I'm going to choose this device group, the one that's, the same as the others. Like I said, you have these different options here. The VA tends to use like this one here. So this year, the Julian date, the device number and load number. But my demo is set up with this one, so I'm going to choose that one. All right, so then we just go down and configure the settings for this new device group that we just created. Does it require BI? No, it doesn't. It's an HLD. Class 6, no. Class 5, no. CI, yes. Let's say it requires a CI every load. So what this means now is anytime that someone scans this device and creates a load, they're going to get prompted that it requires a CI. All right. Now this down at the very bottom, it doesn't, and also it doesn't require Bowie Dix, so let's put not used. Down at the very bottom, we have this set up for alarm notification. And this, what this is, you can do this on any device group, sterilizers, HLD. All this is if the sterilizer's alarms, you can have a message automatically sent to you or to a group of people using the messaging app in CensiTrac. So that's what that does. Let's just leave that off for now, and let's save this. All right, so what we did so far is we created a device group, we added a machine, and we've configured the settings for that group. The next two things that I'm going to show you is something that people that are currently using CtUC, this might also be beneficial because these are things that you can clean up immediately. The next two things are the cycles and load details. So for this device group, I'm telling CensiTrac when the staff result their sterile load, and I'm going to go show you, sorry, their HLD load. I'm going to show you that real quick when they result it. So I'm going to go back to that to show you what the tech sees, and I'm going to enter a scope load. So I'm saying when they result a scope load, this cycle here, this is one thing keep in mind. And the other thing are all of these like options down here. You see we have biocide expiration, the MEC result. All of these things can be configured. You can turn things on and turn things off. So that's what I'm going to show you now. I just wanted to give you a visual of what the tech sees before I go and make those changes. So I'm going to go back to the admin reprocessing machines and get out of this screen of what the tech sees right now. So to do that, I'm going to go to main menu, administration reprocessing machines again. And then I'm back here again. So I'm going to find my group that I just created, click the action menu, and then down at the, we already went into settings. Now we're going to go into cycles and load details. So for cycles, right now, if I were to create a device here, I would have the techs would be able to see all of these cycles, right? So we don't need them to see all of these. We just want them to see the disinfect cycle. So I'm going to get rid of that. And I'm going to save this, okay? And then if I click the action menu again and click load details, these are all of the load details that the techs see when they're resulting their load. So for example, we have, sterilization, dry temperature, sterilization, and dry time. Well, we don't need them to see that because that's, specific to the steam. So let's take those off, but these bottom four, these are newer load details that you may or may not be aware of. So these are really specific to the HLD process. So right now, if you're using CtUC and you're having a hard time accommodating all of that paper documentation in the CtUC module, there's some new load details that you can enable. It might not be everything you need to accommodate it. There might not be a specific field for everything that you're required to track, in which case we might have to do some free text in the notes, but I'll demo that when we go through the process of creating a scope. My point here is that there's some new load details specific to the HLD process that we can enable, and I'm going to do that. All right. Do the staff ever fill out the case reference field? Is that something that they're filling out? Well, if it's not, let's turn that off because it does a couple things. First, it streamlines that resulting page for the staff, and it also removes the ability to input incorrect information in that field. Right? So if it's not there, if it's not being used, it makes sense to just remove it. Let's just get rid of it. And I think that looks good for now. So you just keep in mind these load details that we checked, when we go back to that load list page and create a scope load, you'll see how what's checked is what's going to appear for the end user. So right now we're doing the initial configuration of these devices you know, and or cleaning up existing device groups. So anybody in your databases right now, you can go to admin reprocessing machines, look at a device group, click the action menu beside it, you know, if you obviously have that access, and then go to these. This is where we just visited: settings, cycles, and load details. You know, sometimes load details can use a good amount of cleanup. So I'm sorry, I'm just checking the chat here. I see there's a couple questions. Is there any way for the system to auto select the cycle when there is only one type of cycle? If your sterilizers are interfaced, and I'll talk more about that when we're going through the process, then depending on the type of interface, the CensiTrac will automatically, you know, pass or fail the load, automatically choose the cycle, and automatically upload a digital copy of that sterilizer printout tape. Again, depending on the type of interface. If you're not interfaced, it's you have to manually choose that cycle each time. Okay, so that's it for now. So for this part of it, let's move on to what's next. So what we did is we just created an HLD device, and we just we created a device group, we added a device, and we also edited the settings, cycles, and load details. Perfect. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the main menu, and now we're going to add a scope. So to get to your scopes, you're going to go to Inventory, Scopes, and this here is a list of all of your scope types. So if another thing that I see a lot is if you're on site, or sorry, if you're in your databases and you go to Inventory Scopes, you know, this when you get CensiTrac, it comes with this pre-populated list of scopes here. So if you're already using CensiTrac, and let's say, for example, you're only ever using bronchoscopes or colonoscopes, you're not using any of these other scope types, you can get rid of them. You can edit this scope type, and it'll bring you to a page where you can delete it. And so that way you have a nice clean list of what you're actually using. So let me do that now. So first thing I do when I get here is I'm going to just clean up this page. I know that I'm never going to use a laryngoscope. It's not something that we do. And if we do end up using it later, I can just add it back. But right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click the action menu beside this scope type, this unused scope type, and I'm going to click edit scope type. Oops, sorry. I meant to say I have to get out of this module to do that. So to delete a scope type, what you're going to do is you're going to navigate back to the main menu, and you're going to go to Administration Lists. So to delete a scope type, you're going to go to Admin Lists, and then there's all of these different lists up here. The one I'm looking for is to the top right of the screen, called Scope Types. This is just a list of what we saw from that previous screen. So remember, I don't ever use this. Let's say I don't ever use these bottom 6 or whatever. I'm just going to delete all of these. And then save that by clicking the save at the top right of the screen. And then I'm going to go back to main menu, and then I'm going to go back to my inventory, and then look at my scopes. So here I have a nice clean list of only the scope types that I'm currently using, right? Let's say that a year from now, we are going to use a laryngoscope. So what I'm going to do is at the top right of the screen, I can click add scope type and just add that back. And I have no idea how to spell that. It's probably wrong, but I'm going to add that back. So you can add and take away unused scope types. But what I'm going to do now is kind of talk about this page a little bit. So when you come to this page, what we are seeing is a list of all of our scope types, all right? And you can see that at the top left of the screen, it's defaulted by type. That's why we're seeing that. So if I expand a scope type here, I'm going to have all of, like I expand my bronchoscope, I'm going to have a list of all of my bronchoscopes within that scope type. All right. This, like I said, this demo already has a bunch of scopes in it. So, your databases in your hospital might look a little bit different. Maybe you have, more than this, or maybe you don't have any. So the way that this works then is if I expand this, I've got a list of all of my scopes here. And what we want to do is, let's say we want to add a new scope. All right. So to add a new scope, how I'm going to do that is I'm going to click the action menu beside the scope category. So let's say I'm going to add a new bronchoscope. I'm going to click the action menu and I'm just going to click add scope. What this does now is this brings me to the page where I can add a new scope. So pretty much just asks you what it needs. So what is the catalog number for this new scope? Well, let's say it's a BF1T20D, right? So if it's a BF1T20D, do you see how when I typed BF, every catalog number containing BF populated? That means that this catalog number is already in the database. So I don't need to re-add this. So what I'm saying here is, if I select this catalog number, it's going to automatically recognize what a BF1T20D is, recognize the description, and at that point, I can just enter the serial number and then other information. The other thing, but let's pretend that we're putting a catalog number into this, creating a new scope. That's not an existing scope in our database. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I am going to, let's say we're putting in a BF-1T60D. All right, you see what I mean there? You see when I clicked something, this catalog number is not existing in my database. That's why nothing showed up. Let me do that once more. So BF-1T20D is in there. If I click that, it already knows that. It fills out my vendor and description for me. But if I'm putting a brand new scope in there, let me clear this out. BF-1T60D, nothing's there. So then I need to manually put in my vendor, and I need to manually put in my scope. And when you add scopes, or anytime you add data in a CensiTrac, including scopes, you want to have a consistent format. So, whether I might call it bronchoscope flexible or flexible bronchoscope, right? You just want to have consistent format. Like if you're adding a new scissors, do you want to call it scissors Mayo or Mayo scissors? I always put stuff in all capitalization. I like to have everything all capitalized, just for consistency. Sometimes otherwise, people might put things in like this, new bronchoscope. And then the next time somebody puts something in, and they'll have it all lowercase bronchoscope, and then the next time someone might have it in, they'll have it all capitalized, bronchoscope new instead of new bronchoscope. So point is, when you're inputting data into CensiTrac for consistency, I think it's good to have like a standard format, and just make sure that the people that have the ability to input data into CensiTrac understand that, so that it just helps maintain a clean database and just makes it easier for everybody. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in all capitalization. I'm going to use the new bronchoscope format, or sorry, new bronchoscope. Clearly, you wouldn't call it a new bronchoscope. It would be whatever this scope is actually called. I'm just putting that for now. Okay, so I've added my catalog number, vendor, and description. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click Add Product. So what this did now is this just added this catalog number, and this vendor and this description to my database. So the next time that I were to go add a new one of these BF1T60Ds, it would recognize that it's already in there and populate the vendor and description for me, right? So now what I need to do is I just need to add the scope serial number. So here I'm just going to say, let's say it's a 98989898. Okay. And then if you're at an instrument track facility, there's some of you are at tray track, some of you are at instrument track. If you're at the instrument track facility, You can also put a little 2D etch on the metal of that scope, and then you can also associate it to an instrument scan. So you have that ability is there as well. These other fields down here are optional, not required, but just gives you more reporting power and more capabilities within CensiTrac, especially the expiration date, which I'll explain in a minute. So let's say that, you know, I'm going to leave these two optional fields blank, the asset ID and the purchase ID. But for the expiration, I'm going to say that this scope expires. I don't know. I have no idea when scopes are, maybe like 5 years, or let's just say July 2022. All right. And then from there, I'm going to click save and close. So I just created my new scope. Okay. And I can see that now it's added to my list of scopes. I can either search for it up here at the top or scroll down, and here it is. Here's my new scope that I just created. All right. That's the first step. So the first step is creating a new, creating a new scope. But then what we want to do is we have the ability to, so right now at this point, you could use CtTrac. You could process this scope. You could document your HLD load records, and you could have all of that. But you can really build on CtTrac too by adding like processing steps, media, and there's a lot of different things that you can do. So what I'm going to show you next is how to add processing steps to a scope. And I want to point out that the process, this is where that I want to point out that I'm going to show you how to do this process using just the regular CtTrac. Next, I'll show you how to do this process using CtTrac Advanced, and I'll point out what the differences are. But right now, keep in mind that this is the process of regular CtTrac. So to do that, what I'm going to do is at the top of the screen, remember when I come to scopes, I'm looking at all of my scope categories. At the top of the screen, if I click by vendor, this is going to show me all of the different catalog numbers of scopes that I have. So right now in my database, I only have 2 vendors of scopes created. I have Olympus and Pentax. If I expand my Olympus category, I can see that out of all of those scopes that you saw on the previous screen, there was only 3 catalog numbers. So there was multiple BF1T20Ds, there was multiple BFP10s, and there was only one BF1T60D. I know that because I just created that new scope model. And if you look to the right here, so you can see this BF1T20D, if you look to the right, you see that this model has steps, scope steps associated with it, and it has media associated with it. Okay, so I can see below that this BF1T60D, the one I just created, does not have steps and it does not have media. So what I want to do is I want to add scope processing steps for this model. And if you think about it, it makes sense to add processing steps per the model. I don't need to go in and add processing steps for each of my 15 BF1T20D scopes, because the processing steps are going to be the same for the scope model. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click the action menu beside the scope, and I'm creating new processing steps. You can also, in your databases, you can edit existing by doing the same thing I'm doing. So like I'm going to click this action menu and edit processing steps, but in your databases, you can click the action menu beside your scope model and edit processing steps as well, an existing one. I'm going to create new, and I'm going to click edit processing steps. And remember, this is not CtTrac Advanced. So if you come to this screen in your facility and you see an additional column here, that's CtTrac Advanced, and I'll talk about that next. So yeah, so this is it. This is where you add steps. So step 1, I'm just going to say wipe down scope. Obviously these steps would be more detailed. I'm just putting some stuff here, for example. Right. So I have my processing steps. And then now this is where down here at the bottom is where I say, does this scope type, does every scope that has this catalog number, BF1T60D, does that require a leak test? Yes, it does. All right, and I'm going to save that. So now I can see that I've added, for this BF1T60D, I have added scope processing steps, right? I can also add media, and I can do that by clicking the action menu beside the catalog number and clicking edit media. So here is where I can either put an image, you can add an image for, if you look at the top right, so there's two columns here. You have your image and your media. All right, so for the image, if you look to the right of that, there's a button that says add image from catalog. So what I can do is I can click that and I can search that BF-1T60D. And if this catalog number is in the Census Global Database and there's an image there, you can pull that over. I just made this number up, so there's nothing there. But yeah, so that's how that works. And then, or if you have that camera attachment with a stand, or some sort of webcam, that's what this take picture button would do. Or you could upload a picture, you could upload it from your desktop or somewhere. And doing that, I'm not sure what this picture is. This here is a way to upload it right from your computer and have that image attached to that scope. Below that, you have the media section, and that is where you would add video or any media, and it's the same thing. You could do it from a URL or upload a file. So you can't do it from catalog for the media because that is, there's no media, there's just pictures in the catalog. But yeah, this is how you upload it right from your computer. Oh, this, so this happens to be, we had a raccoon hanging around my house, and that's my brother holding the raccoon. We called him Critter. Anyway, so that's how you add the media or images. So what we just did here is we went to by vendor. So I'm going to just do a very quick recap. From the main menu, we went to inventory, scopes. We added a new, first we deleted some scope types that we weren't using. Then we added a new scope by clicking add the action menu beside the category and add new scope. But then we went to by vendor, and this is where we added a brand new scope scope steps for our scope model that we just created. Remember, that's always done by vendor. Now what I'm going to show you is what CensiTrac Advanced does. So CensiTrac Advanced is a little bit different. So the way that I just showed you as far as adding scope processing steps and doing it that way, I'm just trying to think if it make more sense actually to show you CensiTrac Advanced now or after we run through the scope processing, so you can see how they're both processed different. Let's actually hold off on CensiTrac Advanced. I'm going to show you that in a minute. I'm going to continue this on as if we're just in a regular CensiTrac environment without advanced features. And then we'll circle back to advanced so you can see all of the differences between that. So we will talk about that in a second, but let's hold off on advanced for now. The other thing that I just wanted to touch base on quickly was I'm going to go back to inventory scopes. And if I go to by vendor, remember, this is where you go to look at your scope models. And then this is where you add your processing steps. Say I have a new scope, a new catalog number here, like I just did for that BF1T60D. You could also, when you click edit processing steps, you could copy steps from a different scope model. See, I can't do it right now because this one already has processing steps, but you have the ability to just click this copy steps button, and then a box will pop up and say, what model number do you want to copy from? And you can type that in, and then you'll just pull over existing processing steps from a different model, and then you can just like tweak it. You can move things around. by, clicking and dragging. You can delete things or add things. You just tweak it so it fits that model. But yeah, keep in mind you have the ability to copy. So next, what I wanted to show you was, I know we're kind of coming to the end here, so we have a few more minutes. So before we get into processing a scope, I am going to show you how to delete a scope, and then let's process a scope. And then when we get this afternoon session, I will kind of go into the CensiTrac Advanced, and we'll make sure to cover that. So we have more time this afternoon session with the hands-on. We have 90 minutes. So and our exercise isn't going to take that whole 90 minutes. So let's take the first 30 minutes of that, and we'll kind of finish up what I wasn't able to cover here in this session. So what I'm going to do right now, though, since we have a little bit of time left, is I am going to show you how to delete a scope, because sometimes that's confusing, and and so let's walk through that process. And then when we get back, before we start our hands-on exercise, I'll continue this demonstration and show you CensiTrac Advanced, as well as processing a scope, and talk about some things there. I'll show you the user end process of how they do it, how your techs do it, and then you'll actually get to practice that too. But for right now, let's just go back and look at our scope inventory. And I can see that, let's say I have my scope categories here. If I expand a scope category, let's say that, this scope right here for this Bronco scope, this serial number is no longer at our facility. It hasn't been there for whatever reason, it hasn't been there, or none of these are, right? So if you go to your scope list and there's a lot of outdated scopes, and you want to clean up your scope list to make it nice and accurate of what's currently at your facility, you can remove these scopes from your database or from this list here. And to do that, you can't just click the action menu beside it and click delete. Like there's no option to do that. So to do that, what you're going to do is you're going to click the action menu beside the scope that you want to remove, and you're going to click change status. What this does now is it brings up this box, and it allows you to click this drop down arrow, and you can select what status you want to change it to. Well, I want to change this to a discard request. I want to get rid of this scope, remove it from my inventory. Reason is an optional field. I'm just going to leave that blank. So now what I did is I changed the status of that scope to discard. It's still in my database. It's still here, right? So what I'm going to do next is I am going to go to the main menu, and I'm going to go to the maintenance module to complete that process. So now when I go to main menu, inventory, maintenance, this here is a list of all of my different type of requests for different items. I have, requests for individual instruments. I have requests for sets, but here's the right in the middle here is that scope that I put a discard request in for. So to complete this process, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click the action menu beside this, and I'm going to approve this. When that happens, it brings up this box with all of this other optional information here. This just gives you reporting power for the future should you need it. I'm not going to put anything here. I'm just going to save it. And what that does now is when I go back to my inventory scopes and look at my Bronco scope category, I can see that that scope is no longer there. So that's how you remove a scope. Sometimes there's some confusion on that process. So again, you need to click the action menu beside the scope, change the status to a discard request, go to your maintenance module, approve that discard request, and that will pull it from your inventory. All right, before we break for the day, I'm just going to do a very quick recap of everything that we did without all the extra detail. So we started the day off by creating a new HLD device group and a new HLD device. So I'm going to just do that right now. So let's say that I have a brand new HLD device here in my department. I'm going to walk through that without all the extra, without me talking as much, to kind of show you that it can go quick. It's just I kind of threw in a lot of detail. So I'm going to create a new device. I'm going to go to admin reprocessing machines. And remember, this always defaults to sterilizers. So I'm going to look for my device group. Let's say I'm not adding a new group, I'm just adding a new device. So I'm going to click the action menu beside that device group, click add machine. I'm going to click add new. I'm going to call it MGOER Pro number 53. Let's first to make, okay, then I'm going to go to facility. I'm going to put it in the facility area. I'm going to put in the endo lab. The method I'm going to choose is disinfect. The machine number is 53. Let's make sure that there's no conflicts. So no other device in my database has a machine number of 53. Perfect. All right, I'm going to save that. I'm going to save and close it. All right, now I have a new scope in there. The next thing that I did is I went to, and I started to build my scope inventory. So I went to inventory, I went to scopes, and then from there, what I did is first of all, I removed my unused scope categories. I remember I did that by going to administration lists, and that's where you do that. But then I added a scope by clicking the action menu beside the scope type, and I'm going to click add scope. And then here I created a new scope model, but right now, let's say that I'm getting another scope of the same model in. So I'm just going to select that model, and it's going to remember the vendor and description. And then now I can just simply type in the serial number, and then any other optional fields down here. You have the ability to put stuff there too. And so that's what we did. We saved the scope. And then what we did finally is we went to by vendor, and we looked at all of the scope model numbers that are currently in our database. So to do that, we clicked the action, and then we edited the processing steps. So to do that, what we did is we clicked the action menu beside the individual scope model, and we clicked edit processing steps. And then here is where we added new processing steps for the scope model, or if you want to edit your existing processing steps, this is where you would do that as well. And then this is where we checked leak tests needed. And then we saved that. And then the final thing that we did was we went and we removed a scope. So from the main menu, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to inventory scopes. I'm going to find my scope. Let's say it's this Colano scope, one of these. This one scope here, it's no longer at our facility. I'm going to click the action menu beside that individual scope. Keep in mind now, you have multiple action menus. You have action menus beside the scope type, and you have an action menu beside the individual scope. The action menu beside the scope type is going to give you different options than the action menu beside the individual scope. Right? So to remove that scope, we clicked the action menu beside the individual scope, and we clicked change status. From there, what we're going to do is we're going to change the status to a discard request, and then give it an optional reason. All right. And then to complete that, I went back to the main menu. I navigated to inventory maintenance. And from there, I found my discard request, and I approved that. And I have the ability to input any optional information here, and I saved that, and then that was it. So now when I go back and look at my inventory scopes and look at my Colano scope, there's nothing there, right? And let's say we're not getting any more Colano scopes, then you could go to admin lists and delete that scope type, so it's out of there. So you just don't have an empty scope type. So with that said, again, what we'll do when we get back, can you run through scope? Sorry, I'm just seeing these comments for those who can't make the second session. Sorry, give me 1 second. I'm just getting caught up on these comments. Is there any way to add a new cycle type? Yeah, I can run through CensiTrac Advanced. I'm not sure how long. Hey, Grace, are you there?
I am. So that's a great question with CensiTrac Advanced. That'll be held, I think that's great feedback for another session. We won't be able to do that on this call today. If we wanted to address some of these other questions, we will send a follow-up communication capturing all these questions and responding to them, because let's say we have about 4 more minutes, because we are going over time. That's what I would advise for right now.
Okay. All right. Okay, because I had intended on doing kind of running through the CensiTrac Advanced in the first like 30 minutes of the next session. Would that be okay? I understand that we might not have time to do it on this portion of the call.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Perfect.
Yep.
Right.
And that'll be recorded for, because it is a limited capacity for folks that weren't able to join that. Just know it'll be recorded and it'll be on demand. So if you have those questions about CensiTrac Advanced, that'll be available after the session this afternoon.
Okay, perfect. All right. Yeah, so I wish I could, have more time here, folks, but I know that we got to stay true to the agenda, and I know that people kind of probably plan their day around, you've got other things to do. So this afternoon session, if you can make it, like I said, we will pick up where we left off. So what I'll do, and when we get back this afternoon, we'll run. So we've created all this stuff, and the next we're going to go through the user end functionality of processing a scope. All right, so you're going to see what that looks like in a non-CensiTrac Advanced setting. So you'll see what the technician does step by step. And then after that, what we'll do is I'll go through the CensiTrac Advanced portion and show you what the difference is. That won't take long because we don't need to do anything with the configuration of devices and device groups and stuff. It's just with the scopes themselves. So we'll do those 2 things. And then what we'll do is we'll split off and we'll go into breakout rooms. And we have like a little exercise to where you guys can actually get in the demo and do some hands-on. So that's what this afternoon session agenda will look like. That's how it'll flow. And I am happy to stick on for, a little while and answer these questions. But for those of you that got to go, I will hope to see you this afternoon. So I think that's at 1 o'clock Central Time, I believe.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And Sam, do you mind sharing the keyword for those who are looking to get their CE certificate for this call?
Yes. Thank you for reminding me. Sorry. So for your CE certificates, to get that, when you go to claim that, you got to give that keyword. That keyword is observe.
Yes, awesome. And we dropped the link for that CE certificate in the chat. We'll also be sending that out to all attendees. And there will be a few other on the census portal and in the attendee hub where a majority of you came from. It'll be there under the session. So if any questions, also you can send to Census Marketing. I'll drop that in the chat as well.
Wonderful. Wonderful. All right. Well, I'm going to hang out and try my best to answer some of these questions that are on here. Jacob, are you on the call? Is Jacob here?
Yeah, he's not. He had a meeting.
Okay, Kelly, do you want to hang out with me?
Yep.
Okay. And then, yeah, anybody else, you're free to hang out. But I understand if you got to go, hopefully we see you back. But yeah, let's just start at the first question here. So I'm going to put my chat on the screen. Okay, so the first question is there any way we already answered that one. Is there any way for the system to auto select the cycle? No, unless you're interfaced and depending on the type of interface. And also for your interface capabilities is an advanced functionality. So, and we're going to talk about that in the PM session. So interface capabilities for the CensiTrac module is what I mean. You can interface your other device groups, your sterilizers, and that you don't need any like advanced CensiTrac to do that. But interface capabilities is an advanced thing, and we'll talk more about that. Is there a way to add a new cycle type? Yes, this is where it gets a little tricky. To do that, I'm going to show you quick. So right now, if I go to administration, reprocessing machines, and I look at the device group that I just added, right? So this MG-HLD processor, and I see that these are my devices within that group, and I click settings. So when you say cycle type, I'm guessing you mean this method here, I think is what Courtney Clay, I think is what you're referring to. There is a new way to do that, a way to do that. And you do that by going to your administration sterilization methods module here. And here is where you can add a new sterilization method. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click add sterilization method. And here's where you can free text the name of the method. But, and Kelly might be able to explain this better than me, but for some reason with CscopeTrac, the process class, you gotta kind of trick the system. You gotta choose glutaraldehyde, even though that might not be what you're using for that sterilization, the name of the sterilization method to appear within the scope processing module. Can somebody verify that?
They should be able to click, if they're using peracetic acid, if they're using glutaraldehyde, they should be able to click that. So if you want to say disinfect via, PAA, then you would select that peracetic acid.
All right, let's check. Let's go back, and I just want to double check. Okay, so what we did there, I'm going to pause here. So I'm going to go to sterilization methods, and we put in our sterilization method name, and we gave it a process class of what that actually is. So your process class is like the chemical, right? But your name, you can have say whatever you want. Okay, it's free text. So from there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to administration, reprocessing machines, and I'm going to find that device group. I'm going to expand my device group, and I'm going to try to change this method, right? Because I think that was the question. Can we have a different method there? So I'm going to edit this sterilizer and choose the method of free text. So yes, so that's how you do that. I guess it does not have to be glutaraldehyde as the process class. All right, so let's see. Is there a way to add new cycle type? Yeah, I got rid of a scope. Someone added my mistake. Nice. Way to go, Tanya. Can you add the Rudolph ATP check to the group settings? ATP test to the group settings. Let's look at that. So I think the question was, when you're looking at your group settings of your scope, remember, so that we have our group and then we have the scopes within that group. If I look at the group settings, the question was, can you add an ATP test here? When I talk about ScopeTrac, there's a great way to capture when I talk about ScopeTrac Advanced coming up at 1, there's a great way to capture the ATP and residue and leak test, and I'm going to demo that for you. But with ScopeTrac, non-advanced, just regular ScopeTrac, yeah, you should be able to do that. It's there's not a specific field for it, but you could use like this. Let me just show you what one way that could work.
Can I add something here?
The quality
so
feedback
I
module.
do see this at quite a few hospitals that I go to where they have added it in the like CI required or the class 6 required, stuff like that. My only concern with that is typically after you clean that scope is when you will do that ATP testing, and then you put it into the AER. So you then have to remember what that ATP readout was, or that pass fail, or if you're not the one who's going to take that scope out and document it, then how is that getting relayed? Because you're not going to have the screen to document that ATP or a residue test, pass or fail. You won't have that screen until you've created the load. So what I recommend doing is kind of shying away from this one, just because of the fact you'd have to do your ATP testing, then create your load. Once the load is created and is running, then you'd either go into that load and document the ATP, and it's not going to be in real time. So then you can kind of question, well, how did you test this if it was already in the AER? Or if you pass off with somebody else, then they're documenting that information for you. So I recommend using it in processing steps, as Sam had mentioned. I've seen where customers have created ATP or that residue pass fail, a barcode, one that says pass, one that says fail. And if you would, if it fails, then you're going to start the process over. If it passes, then you just scan it and continue on with your processing. But the best way is with CtTUC Advanced, because then you have the option to, with the ATP testing, type in those numbers. And I'll let you continue on with that, Sam.
Yeah, so we'll get in depth with the CtTUC Advanced, where you can actually incorporate those ATP tests into the scope processing steps and have that tracked. Kelly brings up a good point about doing it here in the group settings, because the ATP test, unless that person is going to make sure to follow through and come back after that scope load has been created, otherwise, that this might and very well could get missed. The thing with doing it in non-CtTUC Advanced, you can have it as a processing step if you're in just your regular CtTUC, but those processing steps can't be reported on unless you're in CtTUC Advanced. Then you can report on that ATP residue and leak test right in your processing steps. And I think that'll make more sense when I show you that, if you haven't seen that already, that CtTUC Advanced. But also, Aaron, another way you could do it, besides the ways that there's multiple ways. So besides the ways that Kelly listed out, another way you could do is also the quality feedback module. So the quality feedback module is very easy to use. You may be familiar with it already. I can just take 30 seconds and just set this up quick. So to do it, I'm just going to go to admin lists. I'm going to go to quality events. I'm going to add ATP test pass. I'm going to save that. I'm also going to add ATP test fail. I'm going to save that. All right. So then now when the staff are doing their ATP test, if you choose to use the quality feedback module, if you don't have CtTUC Advanced, what you can do is they can go to workflow, quality feedback. They can scan their scope. This requires that the scope is scannable because you have to scan it. They could choose their quality event of pass. The responsible party is the one that did it. Other optional information here, then they can save it. And that now becomes a reportable record, because what I can do then is I can then go to reports. I can look in my general category here. I can look at my quality feedback report. I can customize this report, and I can filter out this quality event to show only, ATP test fails and pass. And I can save that, and I can say the last 7 days, the last 6 months, last year, whatever. And then I can run that. And then now I have my record that my ATP test passed. And if I drill down, I can see the ATP test passed. Here's when it was done. Here's who did it. And here's the scope that it was done on. So that's another option. But I think, like Kelly was saying, CtTUC Advanced is probably the best way to capture that. And when I demo that at the beginning of next session, after I run through the workflow process of regular CtTUC, you'll see that. So can you add reprocessing steps like this in decontam, but also for prep and pack? Can you add reprocess? Okay, in decontam. Well, the count sheet is kind of the processing step. You have a couple options in prep and pack. When you scan a container, I assume you're talking about containers. When you scan a container into your prep and pack and you go new assembly, this is kind of your count sheet is a list of what's there, right? But you do have the ability to add instructions. So for this set, you see how there's this I button, like be sure to check the Met scissors for sharpness. You have the ability to add instructions during that, and you can do that by going to inventory containers and then finding that container. So I'm going to search for the container. You can either navigate through the service and locate it, or select it. And then if you click the action menu, see I have 11 of these small sample sets, right? if I click the action menu beside that container and click edit container type, here is where I have all of this information for this container. Down at the bottom is where I can put in assembly instructions. So anything that I type here, this will show up during container assembly. So you can put stuff here, anything you type in this decontam section is where you're gonna, will show up during decontam. And actually Kelly's session, she's gonna be going over all of this. So if you're gonna hang around for that, I think that's tomorrow, she'll go through this in much more detail. You can also, for an individual instrument, you can add what's called an integrity test. So then when they're going through, I'll show you what that looks like. When they're going through and assembling that set, I think one of these has an integrity test. Let's see, right here. So you can make it prompt the user that this individual instrument requires an integrity test, and then you can free text what's required. So Anna, I think that's what you were talking about. And I hope I answered your question. How do you run a report to show that each step was checked off and marked as completed? That's the thing with CtTUC, there isn't one. CtTUC Advanced, you have the capabilities to report on your ATP, your leak test, and residue steps. You can review the scope's previous assembly and see who did what, and I'll show you how to do that. I'll kind of go into that in more detail, but right now if I go to workflow scope processing and click the scope and go review resume, I can see that in this case none of it was done because nobody did anything with this. But if I were to process the scope, right, and I'm going to go through all of this in the next session and click done, and then find that scope again, I think it was this one, review resume. I can, if I review resume it, it'll show me the previous assembly. But yeah, unless you're at the CtTUC Advanced level, that's where you can report. You can incorporate your ATP test, your residue test, and your leak test directly into this processing steps. And I'll show you the difference there. I'll demo that.
Sam, can you hear me?
Yes.
This is exactly what I was asking about. I wanted to see if we could add this in decon, but also in prep and pack, because here we reprocess our scopes partly in decontam, of course, but also we bring them over to the prep and pack and we finish the HLD process here. Does that make sense?
Yes, yep, I think so. So you, in your processing area, you have separate areas. So you have a dirty side of the HLD and then you have a clean side, right?
Correct.
Okay, so and I'm going to cover that in detail, but typically what you would do then is you go to workflow scope processing, you would find your scope. I'm going to try to find the one that I just created. I can't remember which that one was because maybe it was this one. I think it's this one. So, and I'm going to do new process. And again, I'll go into this much more detail. I'm just kind of speeding through it here. But the technician on the dirty side, so your scenario is a little bit, each hospital might be different, right? So you guys in your HLD area, you have a designated dirty side and a designated clean side. Some hospitals have that all in one room, right? So they have, there's like part of that room is their sink and their like all that, and the other half of that room is like their HLD devices. But it sounds like you have like a separate area to where the decontam technician will start that process, and then the technician on the clean side will complete that process. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. This is great, by the way. Thank you.
Hey. So yeah, so I think when they come to that scope processing, the tech on the dirty side is going to do their part. They're going to come here, they're going to click done for the steps that they did, and then they're going to click done. Then the next, they'll pass that through the window or whatever. The next tech will find that scope. Rather than do new process, they're going to review resume, and then they're going to complete the steps they did. So now like whoever's logged in, their name would show up here. And then, so that, is that kind of what you're asking?
Absolutely. It's for just educational documentation. This is great.
Wonderful. Will we be able to get answers to all questions. I think Grace said that we're going to type the answers to these up and save them or send them out to people that
Correct.
had to leave.
Yep.
Can you add multiple picture and media? Yeah, you should be able to. So in the media, if you go to your inventory scopes and you look at your scope, remember you got to go by vendor for that, right? Because you do it at the catalog number level. So if I click media, yeah, you should be able to upload more. Yes, yes, you can. We are looking to add a carb, lipid, and blood test that is trackable to each. I think that, Daniel, I think that was a continuation of something you said earlier.
Sam, it's similar to the ATP process, but we test it before it goes in the next room. I understand what Kelly's saying, but that's easily documentable. We have one person on our clean side, one on our dirty side, and they pass information back and forth. So we would really like to see that step, almost like a chemical integrator, just so that we're recording it.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, if it works for your process, it might not work everywhere, but if it works for you, then, and I understand what you're saying, you have options, right? You have the location scan, like Kelly was saying, you have the quality feedback, or I think what you were getting at was putting it right here in the group settings. So let's just do this EndoLab because I'm going to use this reprocessing group later on. So this EndoLab settings, but it doesn't, it's not designed for that. So what your techs are going to see, I'll show you what they see. So I think this is what you're saying. You would do like no prompting, and then your product would be, actually, let's use, I think you were saying something like this. And this, I just got to say, this probably isn't best practice, but like I said, if it works for and it gives you the information you need and you have a process to where this gets documented, I mean, CensiTrac is customizable. So I don't know. I think you had a couple more, but blood test, carb was the other one. But we're already using that. So let's see if this works. I'm not sure if this is what we got to test it. So what I'm going to do is now I'm going to go back and look at one of those devices. See, because the indicator is still going to say class 6, class 5 CI, but the product is going to say, oops, I just deleted something. That, you see what I'm saying? So it's going to be class. So yeah, but I mean, you have that, the ability is there.
That's awesome. I really appreciate it, Sam.
Yep, no problem. For your CE, any other questions? Is the case reference number added to load? If the case reference number is added to the load details, is there a way to get a report for all case reference numbers related to the scope? Report for all case, yeah. I think so. I think, yeah, well, let's check that. I think there is. So the question was, remember when you're resulting a scope load here and you go into your scope, you enter your scope load, which we didn't cover yet, but we'll get to there. These are considered load details right here. So whatever your texts like are resulting, these are load details. So the question was, if we turn on the case reference number, which I'm going to do, I'm going to go to administration, reprocessing machines, and I'm going to go to find that group, right? I'm going to use the EndoLab group and go to load details and turn on that case reference field. So now when I go back and look at one of those loads, there's that case reference field. So let's just say, I don't know. I don't know what case reference would be. Let's just say like first initial of last name and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then we save that. I think the question was, can you run a report on that? Yes, you can. So that is, or you should be able to. That is going to be in your reporting module. and that's going to be in your sterilization category. And that's going to be one of these reports, probably the sterilizer load. So reports, the way that I found to make reports work for best for me is like, you got to ask yourself the question, what information am I trying to get? Like, try to simplify it into a sentence. All right. And then you come here and you look at these report titles and you say, all right, is this it? Is load compliance report it? Well, what does it do? It gives a list of load compliances by processor and date. No, I don't think that's it. Is sterilizer loads the report? List of sterilizer loads by sterilizer and date. Maybe. Let's see what options we have there. So if I customize this report, do I have the ability to filter out the case reference? Yes, I do. That's a good start. Second question is, do I have the ability to filter out just my HLD loads? I don't know. Let's find out. So up here in the group, that's a good start. I have group. I can filter out and show only NG Endolab. Save that. And then I can turn on my case reference field to save that. You know, I don't care about all this other stuff in this particular report, because based on your question, you asked, if the case reference number is added to the load details, is there a way to get a report for all case reference numbers related to that scope? So you also want to know the scope. Interesting. So that throws a wrench in it for me. I need to find, so right now without that, I think I would be able to see, let's just run this report and see what we see. So I can see the scope processor, or which scope the scope processor rather, and then the load, and then the case reference. So here's the one that I did. All right, there's my case reference. And if I drill down, I can then go to contents and see what was on that load. And that's that scope right there. But I think what you're asking is you want to see it by scope. So I believe. So let's go back until we get back to our report and see if we can filter out the asset. I'm not seeing it. Kelly, do you see if I'm missing something here? So there, that report might exist, Garrett. I would have to spend a little more time looking through these reports and trying to figure that out. Right off the bat, I can see that we can run a report to show the case reference. We have that field, that case reference, right? So we can display that. But if you want to see per, and I can, with this report, I can drill down to see which scope was used on that, you know, that sterile or that HLD load. But I think what you're asking is to view this report a little bit different. And I'm, without spending a little bit more time on it, I'd have to, I'm gonna have to get back to you on that one. Let me jot that one down.
And Sam, sorry, I was on mute, so I was talking, I was
Oh, no
answering your
worries.
question. But yes, there is a way. I just need to look at reports and find it.
Okay.
The other thing is we haven't discussed like case tracking, and that would be, so if you're using that case reference to refer it back to a case, assuming that's what you're using that for, we actually have the case tracking module, which wasn't reviewed at all. And that would be where you'd then be able to say what patient a scope was used on.
Yes, that's probably the better way, actually, Garrett, if you're still on the call. And it looks like you are. So if we have time, there's a lot here that we could get into. If we have time, let's definitely review the case tracking as well and kind of show you that functionality and what that looks like.
Hey,
And I think
Sam.
hey.
Hey, this is amazing and I love to see the engagement. I would just say, let's do about 10 more minutes. And then based on all of this feedback, this is really giving us amazing ideas for continuing education courses. So just know that this is amazing information, and we will take this and continue on creating courses. But just for the sake of time, let's do about 10 more minutes until 11:45 so that you get a break before your 1 p.m.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, that sounds great. So let's just keep going down the list here. We got about 10 more minutes. I'll try to go through some of these a little bit quicker. Some facilities use scope processing button, then select the scope with a leak test pass or fail, then disinfect button. Is this the correct process in processing the scope? I guess I'll just read this to myself so everybody can read it. Yeah, the first part of your question, some facilities use scope processing button and then select the scope with a leak test pass or fail and then disinfect button. So yeah, that is the correct process, depending on your process. So let's just go through that real quick. So let's say I'm in the decontamination part of HLD. I go to workflow scope processing. I find my scope, I click new process. Yes, I want to start a new process. Am I doing a leak test back there? Yes. I'm going to click leak test. I'm going to pass that. At this point, I'm going to click complete my steps that I've completed in decontamination. So like up to here, let's just say it's up to here or whatever. I didn't read these steps, but let's say I complete these four. But I'm still in decontamination. I am not the one who is putting that scope into the HLD device. So I am not going to click disinfect and choose a device. If I am the one who is putting that scope into that HLD device, then I would be the one to click disinfect and choose that device. So if I am not the one at this point, I'm going to click done. And then the next person who picks up that scope and resumes that process, they're going to click off the remaining steps, if any, and they're going to be the one to click disinfect, put it in the HLD device, and then click label if that's part of your process, because label, it will print out, this is customizable, but it'll show, that the leak test passed, who passed it, when it was passed, when the scope expires. This is customizable information here on this label, but oftentimes this label is attached to a disposable tag that's then used to be scanned into a subsequent location. Is this the correct process of processing the scope? Yeah, I mean, if that's how, it depends on how your flow goes. So if you have the same person doing it from beginning to end, that person's going to be the one to leak test and disinfect. If you have somebody in decon and somebody in the clean side, then it's going to be a different person. Can RUAF ATP be added to the menu? Yeah, you can add an ATP test to these scope processing steps, and I'm going to get into that when we talk about CtTrac Advanced, how you can incorporate that and have it reportable directly in the steps. What I showed you in this previous session was not advanced CtTrac. So that's where we use like the quality feedback module or these different modules to kind of accommodate that. But there's a much easier way if you have advanced, and I'm going to show you that. I do not see OPA as an option. Is that an option? So that's going to be in sterilization methods. OPA. So yeah, so when I went to create a sterilization method before, remember we created that free text name and then with a process class of parasitic acid. If you want to add a method, you can add sterilization method, choose the process class of OPA, and then put whatever free text up here. So you put free text OPA.
There's also, you can actually, there is a process class OPA as well. I think that you selected it,
Yep. When we put ATP results in the comments box when the scope is clean before it goes to the AER. So I'm guessing that means the leak test comment box, because if it's before it goes to the AER, then that disinfection load hasn't been created yet. So I'm assuming that you're not you're saying that when you process a scope, workflow, scope processing, you find that scope, you go new process, you click yes, you click leak test, and then is this where you're also putting the ATP test results? Here is the kind of like a manual thing. If that is what you're saying, I don't actually know if this is a reportable field. I think it might be leak test comments, but I'm not certain on that. So I would need to double check that. And let me see how many questions are left. We can, oh boy, there's a lot. I was gonna say we could check it quick. Yeah, let's just double check that quick. So I'm gonna go to reports. I'm gonna look at my sterilization reports. I'm gonna look at the sterilizer loads and customize this. And what I'm looking for is to see if leak test comments. I'm just looking for a leak test comments option or something like that. I'm not seeing it here. This could be the wrong report. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Maybe it's, no, it's not that. Maybe it's this one. Yeah, I don't know that leak test comments. I don't recall ever seeing that. I don't know if somebody, Kelly or anybody else is aware of that.
It's in there, but I would need a few minutes to pull up the reports and find the exact one.
Okay. Let me see. So we put the ATP test results in the comments box when the scope is, okay. What is ATP testing? I will let Linda explain that because I feel like she'll have a better
Yep, so
description. than
Linda
I will.
answered that one. Further
Okay.
down the group chat, Linda answered it.
Okay, perfect. I would like to add a check off for HLD reprocessing steps. Check off. Yeah, so Anna, those steps can be made mandatory or not mandatory. And I didn't have time to get to that. I know we only got 3 minutes left, but I'm going to talk about that when we come back. So when you go to workflow scope processing and you click new process, you see how you can make it so that each processing step you have to click done beside. That can be turned on and off in the scope settings. And I intend to talk about scope settings when we get back, but that's just located in your administration settings. And then the scope group up at the top. And then here, this enable acknowledgement of scope processing steps is where I can turn that on or off. So if I turn it off and save that, and now I go look at this. So if I go to workflow scope processing and I like click one of those, oops, let me go back. Oh, this doesn't matter, I'll do this. So if I go workflow scope processing and click one of these scopes, because I turned it off, it now just acts as a reference guide. It takes away that button, that done button beside each processing step. So that can be turned on and off. I'm going to turn it back on now because I'm going to show if people come back, I want to show everybody to make sure that, because that's kind of a big thing, a good thing to know. So I'm going to leave it on. Are we allowed to use the last initial and last four allowed to be stored in CensiTrac under case reference when at a federal facility?
I answered that one directly to him and told him he had to check with his privacy officer to see what they allow so that they're compliant with HIPAA.
Okay, wonderful, thank you.
And the same thing with the OPA question. I answered that one, that's glutaraldehyde. So.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Yeah, I guess we'll just do one more here. So when we mark instruments missing in the inventory report, it also marks scopes missing. Is there a way? When we mark instruments inventory report, the scope is considered like the way CensiTrac is configured or set up, I believe that scopes are considered an instrument. So right away, when I look at this question, the first thing that comes in my head is no, but I'd have to double check. When we mark,
I have to see like what report they're running, because if you mark it missing in assembly, are they referring to a flexible oscilloscope that's in a like a flexible oscilloscope that's in a container? Yes, that scope's going to show. Or are they referring to in scope processing? I'd have to see where they're, because how are you marking that scope as missing? So I would need more information on that one, or, we would need more information, what they're exactly looking for.
Right, right. In inventory report, I'm wondering if that means, I'm not sure which, that must be or instrument inventory. Instrument, and then the inventory report. I thought, where's that inventory report? Oh, here it is, inventory. Yeah, I guess I would need some clarification on that question. So Stuart, I know we got to run now, but if you want to type that down, I think that we're going to take these questions and work on them. So sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Grace.
Yes, I was just about to say, if you have any questions, just send them in the chat. It's going to be captured automatically. We'll go through and answer them and then share them first, of course, with the attendees that made it, and then we'll make it public to all of the client base. But again, if you have any questions that come up after this call and you weren't able to sign up for the PM session because that was at a capacity that did close, just send any questions to the support desk, your client manager, or to marketing@census.com. It'll come to us and we'll get it answered for you.
Awesome. Well, hey, folks, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. And those of you that are Service Plus customers, we look forward to seeing you coming up soon, I'm sure. So thanks again. I hope that you guys got some value out of this, and I hope to see you back at 1. Bye-bye.